Hello YouTube, I'm back. It's been a long time. I really need to start doing something more with this channel. But what I came to show today is a new airbrush. It's a Neoeco SJ83, and it has a feature that relegated my Posh Talon to backup roll. I've used this airbrush for a few weeks now. This is the latest job with it. It's the Revell 97 Ford F-150. It's not the greatest kit, but it's not the worst either. It's been a work in progress for about 8 years. I started it. I took a break from modeling. Then I came back to modeling and I got into armor models. So recently I decided, after another break in modeling, to finish up some of these kits. This one I had the chassis done, the interior painted. I had the engine compartment painted, the cowl painted. Just didn't have the body painted. So I decided what better way to test this new airbrush than paint a kit. I'm also working on finishing up an 83 Hurst Olds from the same era, about a decade ago. It's probably 8 years. I know I pre-ordered the Hurst Olds kit. I was one of the first to get them, and I started it, and I had a paint issue, and I put it back in the box. Chassis is mostly done. A little dusty. But I'm working on that. And it's still in the body shop, we'll say. But what really led me to buy this airbrush is I was looking at reviews for air compressors, because I've been using a Craftsman 1 gallon compressor, and it's loud, and it's an energy hog. It uses up a lot of power. So I wanted to get a airbrush, a dedicated compressor, something quiet. I got it tankless so it doesn't run all the time. But I was looking at reviews on YouTube for it, and I started coming across people reviewing these, the Neoeco. And everything I saw about this I liked, and it solves the one major issue that I have with the Posh Talon. We'll get out the Posh box and a few pieces. The problem I have is they have the screw-in tips. I don't know if you can see that, but you kind of get a paint buildup on those threads. I don't know how it gets past. It either seals in this taper in the thread, or it seals on this slight taper at the base. on that shoulder, but paint gets past there. So you clean your airbrush out. You don't have to take the tip out. It's clean, you know? So you leave it in there, and you leave it in there, and you leave it in there. And eventually, that paint works like Loctite. And you end up with a two-piece tip. They just snap right off. Then you have to drive a Torx bit, a small Torx bit, into this, because this is still in the gun, the threads, and you have to remove it. I mean, it's worked every time for me and it hasn't been a major issue, but you got to buy a new tip. Well, when I saw the reviews, we'll give a local guy a shout out. Grandpa Mark. I don't know how local he is, but he tagged Youngstown in his videos, and that's local to me. So I'm assuming it's Youngstown, Ohio, and he's had a couple videos for the Shenango Valley IPMS, as well as the Cleveland IPMS. But he and some others have done, reviews on this full teardown. And it starts out just like any posh. You don't have to do all this. I'm just doing it. To clean it, you don't have to remove this ever. Unless your packing fails and you get paint blows up here. That comes from back flushing. But we'll tear it down as far as I ever do for a typical cleaning. This is the magic right here in this tip. I'm not an airbrush aficionado, so this is all new to me. Drop-in tips, self-centering drop-in tips. And it's accurate too. Man, that tip is right in the center of that air cap. That's not going to break off when you unscrew it because you don't have to unscrew it. To me, that makes this a lifetime airbrush. I'm not going to have to worry about buying new seat or new tips because they broke. That's just an unnecessary, I think it's like $12 expense. When I clean it, it just falls out, and I can get in there with my Q-tips, the little pointed ones. Just get in there with your cleaner, and you clean it all out, and you clean the threads. And when you're done, you just stick it back together. And it's quick and easy. When you put these together, people, I see a lot of bad reviews on this. You have this trigger piece. You want to have it aimed forward like that. You start that in, and you keep this on an angle so it stays forward. It'll go in, and it touches the trigger and comes up. See that? Then you put your trigger spring back on. Just tighten this up hand tight. That's all it needs to be. I like to put the collet nut back on loose. And I will gently pick up my needle. You don't want to bend these things. You don't want to damage the tip. So I put my finger there so that I can guide that tip in without touching the metal. And when I put the tips in, or the needles in, I like to give it a rotation against the tip, then I tighten it down. I don't cram it in there. I don't push it in, because you don't want to put a flare on that tip at all. And that's the reason why this has replaced my Pash Talon as the go-to airbrush. It's just super simple. I've had zero problems with it. I've practiced a ton with it. I've used the craft acrylics with it. I've used, the Tamiya acrylics with it. I've used the Ultra Matte from AK. I love this for a matte clear coat. Their gloss, I can't get the gloss to work. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I tried it neat, and it goes on and leaves craters. I've tried thinning it with isopropyl alcohol, does the same thing. I've thinned it with Tamiya X20A thinner, does the same thing. I think I've tried thinning it with water, does the same thing. Tried thinning it with Windex, the same thing. It just will not, it beads up. I don't know. That's outside the scope of this video, but I love this thing. If you're on the fence about the Neoeco SJ83, get it. When they launched this, it was a different airbrush. It used the screw-in tips like Iwata. And you can tell that airbrush from Neoeco because it'll have a wide gold band here. And what they did is they updated it, because those little tips, they're not user-friendly. A lot of people over-tighten them, and they ruin the gasket that's on the tip, and then they can never get it to stay sealed. And how you know the tip's leaking is you just, with paint or water or thinner in the cup, and you just hit the air valve, you'll get bubbling. Well, that's the tip is leaking. So what they did to solve that is they made the screw-in tip, right? But it's just an adapter. You can take the older airbrush with the wide gold band that had the screw-in tips, and you put this adapter on that Neoeco sells. They have a website, and with that adapter you can buy the drop-in tips, and you're good to go. And that fixes that problem. Both airbrushes are $40. So I don't know why anybody would still buy the old style. I mean, if you had a lot of tips, it's a serviceable unit. If you know how to keep those tips from leaking, then there's not a problem with them. I just prefer the ease of, this style. But that's my Neoeco SJ83B, the black. It comes with lots of extras. It has the black anodized cup, which I like the looks of. Looks really good on the shelf. I don't like it in practice because it's hard to see what paint's in there. Something like this paint, yeah, you can see it. White, yeah, you can see it. Clears, that cloudy clear stuff, you can see it. But man, that looks good. Most people prefer the red. All the reviews I've seen had the red. I like the black. The black with the gold and the chrome, man, it just looks sweet. I've saw bad reviews, the anodizing chips inside the cup causes problems. Well, as soon as that happened, they started releasing them with the chrome cup. Now that's customer service. That's how you show forward thinking. So it comes with the black cup. You have 3 tip sizes, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.5, with the corresponding needles and air caps. And you also get 2 large poly cups. You get 2 of these cups, one very large, I can't remember the cc amount, and then that smaller one. This brush does blow a lot more paint than my Talon. You get your tips here, and they don't just have a sticker like the listings say. It's etched in, and there's black paint in it. You have 0.5, 0.2. I wish they gave you a holder for the 0.3 cap and tip and the 0.3 needle. Otherwise, you just got to put them in the container that you just took one out of. You can buy the empty separate, but in typical Chinese fashion, you get 2 cap holders, tip holders, and 2 needle holders for point that are labeled 0.3. I suppose I'll just find a tip protector and I don't know. It's annoying. But that's the only the only one of 2 nitpicks I have. The other is this needle protector. It's too long, and you get wet paint builds up. Excuse me. Wet paint builds up inside, and then you start getting splattering. It needed to be made shorter, just so it barely protects the needle. You could take 1 millimeter off of that, maybe 2 millimeters, maybe 1.5 millimeter, and it would work fine. And then with that large flare, it does not fit into any of the wash jars. It just doesn't fit. So you have to take it off, and you have to take a delicate needle and stuff it into a dark hole. I mean, that's my real only gripe. They do have other tip protectors, but none of them really have an outward flare. They're shorter, which is good, and they're more open, but they all kind of have an inward flare. Like, you look at this cheap Chinese one, it has a nice outward flare. And it's short. You don't get a lot of paint. You don't really get paint buildup in them. The Talon is the same way. It's a larger diameter, and it has an outward flare. It's hard to tell, but that does have an outward flare, and it's open on 3 sides. So to prevent tip dry, you just take some thinner on a brush, and you just go in there like this. And that cleans outside of the tip, it cleans the inside of the cap, the needle protector, and it cleans the tip of the needle. And like if you're in between coats, you can do that and just set it down. And then when you pick it up, you just make sure to give it a spray before you go to your model. This one's a little more difficult, but it's still, you can do the same thing. You just got to get down in there and swirl around, but it holds a lot more whatever you're using for thinner. And it takes a little more once you get back going to make sure all that's blown out. But like I said, I don't use it with the tip protector because it builds up paint and then you end up with splashing. You get splatters. You know, I don't do artist work where I need that tip protector off. So I like to keep one on, just it saves needles. You know, I've only bent one needle, and that was from one of these stands here. With the Posh, you have those openings, and it's easy if you just stab. Like you see a lot of YouTubers, you know, they just stab at it 3, 4, 5 times and it finally goes in. Well, if you hit it just right, that goes between those slots and it bends your damn needle. So typically I like to use the top stand on these. You don't really have to worry about it bending the needle on this as long as you have the guard on. It can't really get in there unless you're trying and like go at an angle, you know. But that's my review on the Neoeco SJ83. And this comes with a quick connect. You know, otherwise it's basically the same kit as the Pash Talon, except with the Talon you don't get all the extra cups, and the Pash didn't come with a quick connect, but it did come with a hose. So I'd say it's about equal, considering that Pash sells their hose for the same price as their disconnect. It's about $17, $18. And their female part of their quick disconnects are not very good. They don't last a couple weeks if you're lucky. But that's how a $40 airbrush relegates a $140 airbrush to backup status. 140, 40. If I were going to recommend one of these to somebody new to airbrushing, I would recommend the Neoeco all day long, without a doubt. No hesitation in that whatsoever. I think it sprays just as good in every situation and better in some situations. I've done German camouflage with this Talon, and you can't get a decently fine edge line. While the Neoeco isn't, you know, say an Illustrator's type of brush that's supposed to get a perfect, you know, 0.5 millimeter line. It does a better job than the Talon at something like camouflage, where a little bit over doesn't matter, but it has a lot more over, and you tend to have to clean it off with a little bit of thinner, where this does a much better job. Like I said, it sprays great. I've used it with the Apple Barrel craft acrylics. This happens to be the khaki color of the F-150 The flat black that's on some parts of the F-150, uh, pavement that's on some parts, the bed liner, the bumper, and the AK Ultra Matte Varnish. Sprays this wonderfully right out of the bottle. The patch does too. It doesn't need thinned to be sprayed. And it goes on smooth, silky smooth. But you'll see some bad reviews, and like I said, most of them are, nearly all of them are first-time airbrushers. Some of them don't even realize you have to thin the paint. I saw one guy that bought strainers thinking that that would take out the thick paint, and only paint thin enough for the airbrush would go through. You know, you have to take all the reviews with a grain of salt, even the ones that claim they've been airbrushing their whole life. You know, they might only be 12, and they're not thinning the paint correctly. You know, you don't have to thin it perfect every time, but there's a range that you have to be in, and with practice, you get in that range. And I think it's a heck of a deal. $40. You know, I'd pay, if I got to use this, test this out, and somebody told me that it was $80, I would still buy it. I mean, if I got to test it out and somebody told me these are both $140, I would still pick this. I mean, come on, Pash. You got to up your game. The chrome finish is horrible on this. I don't know if you can see around the trigger area where it's fading. I mean, the whole way around. Just bad chrome work. I mean, there's spots on the cup. The inside of the cup isn't chromed. You know, it's just brass. And this light doesn't do it any good, but, you know, certain solvents don't react well with that brass. So you have to really clean it and clean it and clean it. You know, the cap, it stays on. You know, it's just friction fit, no O-ring, where Neoeco has O-rings on the caps. However, nothing is worse than a Chinese cheap airbrush that came with my compressor. This cap doesn't stay on. I guess there's a thing where they make these caps oval shaped, you know, and that friction holds the cap on, but not with this one. See, that's tight all the way around. Other than that, this airbrush, you know, it came with my TimberTech compressor. You know, it uses the small screw-in nozzles like Iwata. It sprays fine. You know, it's not as good as either one of those two, but it works fine. It just really sucks because paint sits in the front of this cup. When you go to clean this out, there's a flat spot in there that just holds paint down at the front edge. But it works. I mean, I don't really have a use for it. I don't typically spray primers. And I don't agree with the theory that you need primer for this paint to stick and hold. I painted the black and the tan in one day, probably an hour apart. Once this acrylic's dry, it's dry. It's not going to stick any better 2 days later, 3 days later. And I masked the bed off to paint the tan. The khaki. I mean, it absolutely zero peel. You know, painting it in one afternoon. So I don't need a airbrush just for, you know, say primer. It is nice to have this one. I think I have the 3.7 needle in. Yeah. This has the 3.7 needle in it right now. This has the 0.5 needle in it. This also comes with a 0.25 and a 0.66. And with the 0.66, you can use the fan cap, which is a nice addition. When you have large areas to paint, you know, more than a kit, more than a 1/24th kit. You know, if you're doing like 1/8 or something like that, this fan tip would be absolutely wonderful. It'd be nice if Neoeco included a fan tip with these, but it's not a deal breaker. But that's my review and comparison of the Neoeco compared to the Pash Talon. Better fit and finish on the Neoeco for $40. Useful accessories included with it. You know, you get the black cup, you get the 2 plastic cups, and you get the chrome cup. And it comes with the quick release. You know, in the 3 needle sizes. This comes with 3 needle sizes, the air cap, you know, the fan cap, and it came with a hose for $140. It did come with a nice little screw-on airbrush holder that I've never committed to use, and I don't know where it's at right now. It's just a metal sorry, I'm digging off camera, seeing if I can find it. There it is. It came with this. It screws onto your bench. You know, it can either go this way, you know, or it can go, I guess it has to go this way. But I've never committed to using it, never committed to screwing it onto something. Mostly because I don't really have an edge that would hold it in this orientation for me. You know, I only have surfaces that are within reach that would hold it like this. You know, like on the front of the bench, and I don't really want that. So I've never used it. But it is nice. The other thing I use is a US General, one of them little toolboxes. Works great for an airbrush box. Both of these fit in the top. All 3 of my airbrushes do fit in the top under the lid. You got a drawer for your hoses and larger items, and then you have a drawer that you can put all your fittings, spare cup in. I tend to keep the needles and the The tips, I keep those in the factory boxes. I don't really change them out all that often. So to me, it's not really something I need handy. I just keep them in a desk drawer here and change them out as I need them. But this video is getting long and I feel like I'm rambling, so I'll let you all go. I just wanted to give you a comparison and a review of my main two airbrushes. And I'll hopefully post more soon. And I'll see y'all later. Thanks.